The cargo ship Starling moved slowly through the dark emptiness of space. It was not a beautiful ship. It was not fast or powerful. It carried medical supplies to small colonies on the edge of human territory, and it did this job quietly, without glory. Danny Cole sat in the cockpit of his small fighter craft, watching the stars drift past his window. He was 28 years old, with tired eyes and rough hands. He had grown up on a colony world called New Haven, a place of dust and hard work. He had learned to fly because flying meant freedom, and freedom was the only thing worth wanting. 3 fighter pilots protected the Starling on its journey. Danny was one of them. The others were a woman named Grace and an older man named Pete. They flew in a loose formation around the cargo ship, their eyes on their sensors, their minds wandering through the boredom of empty space. Captain Amy Walsh commanded the Starling from its small bridge. She was a practical woman who did not like surprises. She liked schedules. She liked routine. She liked knowing exactly what would happen next. Today she would not get what she liked. The first sign of trouble came as a faint signal on the long-range sensors. Danny noticed it first because he had nothing better to do than stare at his screens. It was a distress call, weak and broken, coming from somewhere ahead of them. He opened his communication channel. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Captain Walsh's voice came back, flat and careful. "I see it. Valorian signal." Danny felt his stomach tighten. The Valorians were an alien species that controlled a vast territory near human space. They were old, powerful, and proud. They had never attacked humans, but they had never welcomed them either. The two species existed in a state of cold politeness, watching each other across the void. "What's a Valorian ship doing out here?" Grace asked over the comm. No one had an answer. The distress signal grew stronger as they moved forward. Danny adjusted his sensors and felt his blood turn cold. The Valorian ship was under attack. He could see the energy signatures of weapons fire, the scattered debris of destroyed escort fighters, and the ugly shapes of Kethrani raiders surrounding a single crippled shuttle. The Kethrani were monsters. Everyone knew this. They came from the dark places between stars, and they took prisoners for reasons no one wanted to think about too carefully. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply took what they wanted and disappeared. Captain Walsh's voice was tight. "All fighters, hold position." Danny watched his screen. The Valorian shuttle was venting atmosphere. Its engines were dead. The Kethrani ships were moving closer, preparing to board. "Captain," he said, "they're going to take them." "That's not our problem," Walsh replied. "We have no treaty with the Valorians. If we intervene, it could be seen as an act of aggression. It could start a war. If we don't intervene, those people die. We don't know who's on that ship. We don't know anything. Our job is to protect our cargo." Danny knew she was right. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to turn away and pretend they had seen nothing. Politics was complicated. Space was dangerous. You could not save everyone, but Danny had never been good at being smart. "Sorry, Captain," he said quietly. Then he pushed his throttle forward and his fighter leaped toward the battle. He heard Walsh shouting behind him, heard Grace calling his name, but he did not stop. The Kethrani ships grew larger in his view screen, ugly and cruel, covered in spikes and sharp angles. There were 6 of them. His single fighter would not last long against 6. Danny did not think about lasting. He thought about the shuttle, about the people inside, about the fear they must be feeling. He thought about his mother, who had died when raiders hit New Haven 20 years ago. He thought about how no one had come to help her. He opened fire. His weapons were small, designed to chase away pirates, not fight warships. But the Kethrani were not expecting resistance. His first shots hit one of their ships and sent it spinning away, smoke pouring from its hull. The other 5 turned toward him. Danny flew like he had never flown before, twisting and diving, using every trick he had learned in his years of service. Energy blasts screamed past his cockpit. His shields flared and died. Warning lights covered his control panel in angry red. One of the Kathrani ships exploded behind him. He looked back and saw Grace's fighter diving through the wreckage, guns blazing. Pete was right behind her. "You idiot," Grace said over the comm, but she was laughing. The Starling arrived moments later, its cargo bay doors open, its defensive guns firing in all directions. Captain Walsh's voice was cold fury. "All fighters, cover that shuttle. Get those people out of there." The Kathrani, suddenly facing more opposition than they had expected, began to retreat. They were cowards at heart, Danny thought. They only attacked when victory was certain. But Danny's fighter was dying. The damage was too great. His engines sputtered and failed, and he found himself drifting toward the Valorian shuttle with no way to stop. "I'm going to crash," he said calmly. "Eject," Grace screamed. "No time." He aimed his broken fighter at the shuttle's docking bay and prayed that whoever designed the thing had built it strong. The impact threw him against his harness. Metal screamed against metal. Glass shattered. Everything went dark. When Danny opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor of an alien ship, surrounded by debris and smoke. His head was bleeding. His ribs ached. But he was alive. He pushed himself up and looked around. The docking bay was damaged but intact. Emergency lights flickered overhead. And standing in front of him, staring with huge silver eyes, was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. She was tall and slender, with skin like pale moonlight and hair that seemed to flow like water. She wore robes of deep blue, torn and stained with blood from a wound on her arm. She looked at Danny with an expression he could not read. Shock, perhaps, or wonder. She spoke in a language he did not understand, her voice like music in a minor key. Danny wiped blood from his eyes and tried to smile. "I don't speak your language. Are you hurt? Can you walk?" She tilted her head, studying him like he was something impossible. Then she spoke again, this time in broken but clear human words. "Why did you come?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about treaties and politics and all the reasons he should have stayed away. None of them seemed to matter now. "You were in trouble?" he said simply. The Valorian woman stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bloody skin. Her eyes filled with something that might have been tears. She did not understand him. Her people had taught her that humans were primitive and selfish, driven only by greed and fear. They did not risk their lives for strangers. They did not sacrifice themselves for nothing. But this human had done exactly that. Outside, the Kathrani were gone. The Starling was broadcasting an all-clear signal. They were safe, they were alive, and Princess Kalith Soran, third daughter of the Valorian High Matriarch, had just had everything she believed turned upside down by a bleeding human pilot who did not even know her name. Danny woke up in a medical bay that smelled like chemicals and clean metal. His head was wrapped in bandages. His ribs were sore but no longer screaming. Someone had taken good care of him while he slept. He sat up slowly and found the Valorian woman sitting in a chair beside his bed. She had not left his side for the 12 hours he had been unconscious. The ship's doctor had tried to make her leave, but she had refused with a quiet stubbornness that allowed no argument. Her name was Kalith. She had told the crew this much, though she had not told them anything else. She watched Danny with those silver eyes, her expression careful and guarded. "You are awake," she said. "Seems like it." Danny touched the bandage on his head and winced. "How bad is it?" "The doctor says you will recover. You were lucky." "Lucky?" Danny almost laughed. "That's one word for it." Captain Walsh appeared in the doorway. Her face was a storm of complicated emotions, anger and relief fighting for control. She looked at Danny for a long moment, then shook her head. "You disobeyed a direct order," she said. "You could have gotten yourself killed. You could have gotten all of us killed." "Yes, ma'am. You're also the reason everyone on that shuttle is still alive," she paused, "including, apparently, a member of the Valorian royal family." Danny blinked. He looked at Kalith, who lowered her eyes. "Your royalty?" "I am the third daughter of the High Matriarch," Kalith said quietly. "My mother rules the Valorian sovereignty." Danny let this information settle into his brain. He had crashed his fighter into a shuttle to save an alien princess. His life had become very strange very quickly. "Why were you out here?" he asked. "This is neutral space. Dangerous space." Kalith hesitated. "I wanted to see human territories, to understand your people. My mother forbade it. I came anyway." "So you snuck out?" "Yes?" Danny could not help but smile. "Sounds like something I would do." The Starling limped toward a human station called Waypoint. It would take 2 days to arrive, 2 days of repairs and rest and awkward conversations. Word spread quickly through the small crew that they had a Valorian princess aboard, and everyone had opinions about what this meant. Some crew members were excited. The Valorians had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. Perhaps this could be the beginning of friendship, of trade, of alliance. Others were worried. The Valorians had always looked down on humans. They called humanity a young species, too aggressive, too emotional, too dangerous. What would happen when they learned a human had touched their princess, had bled on her, had carried her unconscious body to safety? Kalith spent most of her time with Danny. This bothered the crew, but no one knew how to stop her. She asked him endless questions about human life, human customs, human families. She seemed fascinated by the smallest details. "Your people form permanent bonds?" she asked one evening as they sat in the ship's small observation room. "Two individuals, joined together for life?" "We call it marriage," Danny said. "It doesn't always work out, but yeah, that's the idea. My people have arrangements, political alliances, the joining of great houses." Kalith looked out at the stars. "It is not the same thing." "Do you get to choose who you marry?" "No." Danny did not know what to say to that. He had grown up poor, with nothing to offer anyone. No one had ever wanted to arrange his marriage. He had always thought of this as bad luck, but now he was not so sure. "Why did you save me?" Kalith asked suddenly. She had asked this question before, but she did not seem satisfied with his answers. "You did not know who I was. You had nothing to gain. Your captain ordered you to stay away." Danny thought about it. He had been thinking about it for 2 days now, and he still did not have a good answer. "There was a raid on my colony when I was 8, he said finally. "Pirates. They came in fast and hard, and by the time help arrived, my mother was dead. I spent a lot of years angry about that. Angry at the pirates, angry at the people who didn't come, angry at the universe for being so cruel." He paused, watching the stars drift past the window. "I don't know why I flew toward your ship. I just knew that someone was in trouble and I could help, and that was enough. I didn't want to be the person who didn't come." Kalith was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool, smooth, not quite human. "In my culture," she said softly, "when one person saves the life of another, a debt is created. A life debt. It is sacred. It binds the two souls together until the debt is repaid or released." Danny looked at their joined hands. "What does that mean?" "It means I owe you my life. Everything I am, everything I have, belongs to you until the balance is restored." She met his eyes. "It also means I cannot let any harm come to you. Not from my people. Not from anyone." "I don't want you to owe me anything," Danny said. I didn't save you to get something back. I know. Kalith smiled, and it transformed her face into something radiant. That is why the debt is so heavy. The Starling arrived at Waypoint Station on the third day. It was a rough place, a collection of docking bays and trading posts built into a dead asteroid. Humans, aliens, and everything in between passed through its corridors. It was loud and dirty and alive. Danny was helping with the repairs when Kalith found him. Her face was pale, her silver eyes dark with fear. "My mother knows where I am," she said. "She is sending a ship to collect me." "That's good, right? You can go home." "You do not understand." Kalith gripped his arm. "My brother Valith is coming. He hates humans. He thinks you are all barbarians and monsters. When he learns what you did, when he learns that you touched me, carried me, bled on me..." She shook her head. "He will kill you." Danny felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "So I should run." "Yes. You should leave now, before the ship arrives. Disappear into the station. Find a transport heading deep into human space. My brother will not follow you there." It was sensible advice. Danny had spent his whole life running from things, from poverty, from pain, from the memory of his mother's death. Running was easy. Running was safe. But he looked at Kalith, at the fear in her eyes, at the trembling of her hands, and he knew he could not leave her. "I didn't save you just to abandon you now," he said. "Danny, please. You do not know my people. You do not know what they will do." "Then I guess I'll find out." Kalith stared at him like he had lost his mind. Perhaps he had. Perhaps this was the stupidest thing he had ever done, even stupider than flying into a battle alone. But Danny had spent his whole life being careful, being smart, being safe. He was tired of it. He was tired of running from things that scared him. The Valorian warship Throne of Stars dropped out of hyperspace 4 hours later. It was enormous, a mountain of crystal and light, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. It made the Starling look like a toy. Kalith stood at Danny's side as they watched the ship approach. Her hand found his and held it tight. "Stay behind me," she said. "Let me speak first. Whatever happens, do not show fear." Danny squeezed her hand. "I'm not afraid." It was a lie, but it was a good lie. Sometimes lies were all you had. The docking bay doors opened, and a squad of Valorian soldiers marched through, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. Behind them came a tall figure in robes of midnight black, his face cold and cruel and beautiful in the way that winter storms are beautiful. Commander Valith Soran, eldest son of the High Matriarch, looked at his sister with disappointment. Then he looked at Danny, and his eyes filled with something that might have been hatred. "So," he said, his voice like ice cracking, "this is the human." Commander Valith Soran was everything his sister was not. Where Kalith was curious, he was certain. Where she asked questions, he made statements. Where she saw possibilities, he saw only threats. He looked at Danny the way a person might look at an insect that had crawled into their home. Not with anger exactly. More with disgust. With the cold certainty that this thing did not belong and needed to be removed. "Seize him," Valith said. 2 soldiers moved toward Danny, their hands reaching for their weapons. Kalith stepped between them. "Stop!" Valith's eyes narrowed. "You dare to protect this creature?" "This creature saved my life." Kalith's voice was steady, though Danny could see her hands shaking. "I invoke the life debt. By our oldest laws, he has the right to be judged by the High Matriarch herself." The soldiers hesitated. Valith's face twisted with something ugly. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. The law is clear. I owe this human my life. Until that debt is resolved, no one may harm him." Kalith lifted her chin. "Not even you, brother." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension in the docking bay was thick enough to choke on. Danny watched Valeth's face, watched the anger fighting against something else. Duty, perhaps, or tradition. Finally, Valeth stepped back. "Very well," he said. "The human will come with us. He will stand before the matriarch and she will decide his fate." He looked at Danny with cold promise in his eyes. "I very much look forward to her judgment." The soldiers surrounded Danny but did not touch him. Caleth walked beside him as they made their way through the station toward the Valorian ship. Behind them, Captain Walsh and the crew of the Starling watched in helpless silence. Danny glanced back once. Grace was crying. Pete looked like he wanted to start a fight. Walsh just stood there, her jaw tight, her eyes dark with guilt. "It's okay," Danny called back to them. "I'll be fine." He did not believe it, but he said it anyway. The throne of stars was like nothing Danny had ever seen. Its corridors were made of crystal that glowed with soft inner light. Its walls curved and flowed like frozen water. Everything was beautiful, perfect, designed to make visitors feel small and primitive. Danny felt very small indeed. They gave him a room that was somewhere between a guest chamber and a prison cell. It had a bed and a window that looked out on the stars. The door locked from the outside. Caleth came to visit him that first night. She looked tired, older somehow, as if the encounter with her brother had drained something from her. "The journey to my home world will take 7 days," she said. "I will teach you what I can, our customs, our history, our laws." "Will it help?" Caleth hesitated. "I do not know. My mother is very old. She has ruled for 300 years. She has never shown mercy to an outsider." "Never?" "Never." Danny absorbed this information. 300 years of rule, 300 years of decisions. In all that time, no outsider had ever been spared. The odds were not good. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Caleth looked at him with those silver eyes. "Because you helped me." "Because you asked nothing in return. Because—" She stopped, struggling to find words. "Because in my entire life, no one has ever done anything for me simply because it was right. Everything is politics. Everything is calculation. Everything is power and advantage and manipulation." She sat down on the edge of his bed. "When you crashed your ship into my shuttle, when you pulled yourself from the wreckage bleeding and broken, when you asked if I was hurt before you even knew your own injuries—" She shook her head. "I did not understand. I still do not understand. But I want to. I want to understand what makes humans do such things." Danny did not have a good answer. He was not sure there was one. Over the next 7 days, Caleth taught him everything she could. She taught him about Valorian history, about their great empire that stretched across 1,000 worlds. She taught him about their religion, their belief in the sacred balance of all things. She taught him about their social structure, the great houses and noble families that had ruled for millennia. And she taught him about her mother. High Matriarch Thesara Soran had been born in a time of war. The Valorians had been fighting a losing battle against an enemy called the Vrath, a species of conquerors who had destroyed a dozen civilizations. Thesara had risen through the chaos, had united the scattered Valorian houses, had led her people to victory when all seemed lost. She was a legend, a living goddess to her people. And she had spent 3 centuries protecting her empire from any threat, internal or external. Humans were considered a threat. Not because they were powerful, but because they were unpredictable. They grew too fast, spread too quickly, and refused to follow the rules that governed proper civilizations. They were chaos in a universe that valued order. "My mother believes humans will one day destroy themselves," Caleth said, "or destroy others. She sees your species as a fire that burns bright but cannot be controlled." "Maybe she's right," Danny said. "We're not always good at controlling ourselves." "But you can be good. You proved that." I'm one person. I don't speak for my whole species. Calith smiled sadly. Neither do I, but perhaps that is enough. On the seventh day, the throne of stars arrived at Valoris Prime. Danny stood at the window of his chamber and stared at a world that made his breath catch in his throat. Valoris Prime was covered in crystal spires that caught the light of 3 suns, creating rainbows that danced across continents. Its cities were works of art, elegant and ancient and beautiful beyond description. And its people hated him. He knew this from the moment he stepped off the ship. The soldiers escorted him through streets filled with Valorians who had never seen a human in person. Some stared with curiosity. Others turned away in disgust. A few made gestures that needed no translation. Calith walked beside him through it all, her head held high, her eyes fixed forward. She did not respond to the whispers or the stares. She simply walked, and Danny walked with her. The palace was the largest structure Danny had ever seen, a mountain of living crystal that seemed to grow from the planet itself. Its halls were filled with Valorian nobles in robes of every color, their voices falling silent as the human passed by. At last, they reached the throne chamber. The doors were 50 feet tall, carved with scenes from Valorian history. They opened slowly, revealing a room that seemed to contain the sky itself. The ceiling was transparent, showing the 3 suns and the star-filled heavens beyond. The floor was polished crystal that reflected everything like a perfect mirror. And at the far end, on a throne that seemed to be made of frozen light, sat High Matriarch Thesara Soran. She was ancient. Danny could see it in her eyes, in the way she held herself, in the weight of centuries that pressed down on her shoulders. But she was not weak. There was steel in those eyes, steel and ice and something that might have been curiosity. Danny walked forward until he stood before the throne. He did not bow, he did not kneel. He simply stood, a small human in a room full of beings who wanted him dead. Thesara studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through ice, cold and beautiful and dangerous. "So," she said, "this is the creature that touched my daughter," the court murmured. Danny felt 1,000 eyes on him, felt the hatred and the fear and the disgust. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide. He wanted to be anywhere but here. Instead, he met the matriarch's gaze and said nothing. He had nothing to say. He had done what he had done, and no words would change it. Thesara leaned forward on her throne. "Do you know why you are here? Human?" "Yes." "Do you know what happens to outsiders who touch royal blood?" "I've been told." "And yet you came anyway. You did not run. You did not hide." The matriarch's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about Calith, about her kindness and her curiosity and her courage. He thought about the debt she owed him and the debt he felt he owed her in return. "Because running wouldn't change anything," he said finally. "I saved your daughter. That's true whether I'm here or 1,000 light years away. I can't undo it. I wouldn't want to." The court erupted in angry whispers. How dare this human speak so boldly? How dare he stand before the matriarch without trembling? But Thesara raised her hand, and silence fell. "The judgment will begin tomorrow," she said. "Until then, the human will remain in the palace, under guard." She looked at Danny one last time, and something flickered in her ancient eyes. "You interest me, little creature. I have not been interested in anything for a very long time." It was not comfort. It was not hope. But it was something. Danny held on to it as the guards led him away. The throne chamber was filled with every noble family in the Valorian sovereignty. They had come from across the empire to witness the judgment of the human, to see this strange creature who had dared to touch royal blood. Some wanted justice, others wanted blood, most simply wanted entertainment. Danny stood in the center of the great hall, surrounded by guards, facing the high matriarch on her throne of frozen light. He had not slept the night before. He had spent the hours staring at the ceiling of his chamber, thinking about his life, about the choices he had made, about the strange path that had led him here. He was not afraid to die. He had made peace with death a long time ago, on a dusty colony world where his mother had bled out in his arms while help failed to arrive. What he feared was dying for nothing, dying without meaning. But perhaps this had meaning, perhaps saving Caliph, standing here before her people, showing them what a human could be. Perhaps that meant something. Commander Valith stepped forward to address the court. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished bone, and his voice rang through the chamber with cold authority. We are gathered to judge the human called Danny Cole. He violated our space. He attacked vessels in our territory. He laid hands upon the body of Princess Calith Soran, third daughter of our divine matriarch. Valith's eyes found Danny. For these crimes, I demand execution. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the court. Danny said nothing. There was nothing to say. Calith stepped forward. She had changed into formal robes of deep blue, the color of her house, and her silver hair was bound with crystals that caught the light of the three suns streaming through the transparent ceiling. I speak in defense of the human, she said. Valith made a sound of disgust. You have been corrupted by your time among them. You cannot see clearly. I see more clearly than I ever have. Calith turned to face the court. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you the truth. She told them everything. The attack on her shuttle. The death of her guards. The Kathrani ships closing in, preparing to take her to a fate worse than death. And then, when all hope was gone, a single human fighter breaking through the enemy lines. He did not know who I was, Calith said. He did not know I was royalty. He did not know anything about our people or our customs. He simply saw someone in danger, and he acted. He acted foolishly, Valith said. He acted bravely. There is a difference. The court whispered among themselves. This was not what they had expected. They had expected a story of human aggression, of calculation and manipulation. They had not expected a story of sacrifice. High Matriarch Thesara raised her hand for silence. I would hear from the human himself, she said. Step forward, Danny Cole. Danny walked toward the throne. His legs felt weak, but he kept his back straight and his eyes forward. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him tremble. You saved my daughter's life, Thesara said. This is not disputed. What I wish to understand is why. I've been asked that question many times, Danny said. I don't have a good answer. Try. Danny was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Where I come from, he said slowly, people don't always help each other. We're selfish. We're afraid. We tell ourselves that other people's problems aren't our business, that we can't save everyone, that the smart thing is to look out for ourselves. He paused. But that's not the kind of person I want to be. I saw your daughter's ship under attack and I knew I could help, so I helped. It wasn't complicated, it wasn't calculated, it was just the right thing to do. Thesara leaned forward. But surely you expected something in return? A reward, recognition, political advantage. No. You expect me to believe that you risked your life for nothing? I didn't say it was for nothing. Danny met her eyes. I did it because it mattered. Because her life mattered. Because every life matters. Even the life of a stranger. Even the life of someone from a species that doesn't like mine very much. The court erupted in angry voices. How dare he speak this way? How dare he lecture the matriarch about the value of life? But Thesara did not look angry. She looked thoughtful. My people believe that humans are dangerous, she said. They believe you are driven by greed and violence, that you cannot be trusted. that you will one day spread across the galaxy like a plague and destroy everything we have built. Maybe some of us are like that, Danny admitted. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We hurt each other. But we also love each other. We protect each other. We sacrifice for each other. He gestured at the grand chamber around them. You've built an amazing civilization here. Beautiful, powerful. But I wonder sometimes if you've forgotten what really matters. Valeth stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. You will not speak to the matriarch this way. Let him speak, Thessera said quietly. Danny continued, his voice steady. I didn't save your daughter to prove anything. I didn't do it to impress you or to change your mind about humans. I did it because she was in trouble, and I could help, and that's enough. That should always be enough. He took a deep breath. You can execute me if you want. That's your right. But it won't change what happened. It won't undo what I did. And maybe, when I'm gone, some of your people will remember that a human gave his life for one of yours without asking for anything in return. Maybe that will matter more than all the politics and prejudice and fear. The throne chamber was silent. Every eye was on the High Matriarch, waiting for her response. Thessera studied Danny for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. When my daughter first returned to us, she said something to me. She said, "Mother, he saved my life." I did not believe her. I thought she had been deceived, manipulated, confused by her ordeal. She rose from her throne and descended the crystal steps. For the first time in living memory, the High Matriarch walked among her subjects, her ancient robes trailing behind her. I have ruled this empire for 300 years. I have seen wars and plagues and disasters beyond counting. I have made terrible decisions and necessary sacrifices. I have done what I believed was right, even when it was hard, even when it was cruel. She stopped in front of Danny, close enough to touch. In all that time, I have never seen an outsider act as you have acted. I have never seen anyone give so much for so little. I have never... She paused and something flickered in her ancient eyes. I have never been wrong about an entire species. Valeth stepped forward. Mother, you cannot be considering... Silence. The single word cut through the air like a blade. Valeth fell back, his face pale. Thessera reached out and touched Danny's face, just as Calith had done on the shuttle so many days ago. Her fingers were cool and dry like old paper. The life debt is valid, she said. By our oldest laws, this human is bound to my daughter's house until the debt is repaid or released. He will remain on Valoris Prime, under my observation. The court erupted in chaos. Some voices cried out in protest. Others seemed relieved. Valeth looked like he wanted to kill someone. But Danny barely heard any of it. He was staring at the matriarch, at this ancient being who had just spared his life and trying to understand what had happened. Thank you, he said. Thessera almost smiled. Do not thank me yet, little creature. You have survived the judgment. But surviving what comes next will be much harder. She turned and walked back to her throne. Welcome to Valoris Prime, Danny Cole. I suspect your time here will be most interesting. Danny let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He was alive. Against all odds, against all expectations, he was alive. He looked across the chamber and found Calith watching him, tears streaming down her silver cheeks. She smiled, and in that smile Danny saw something that looked like hope. It was enough. For now, it was enough. 6 months passed on Valoris Prime. Danny lived in a small chamber in a quiet corner of the palace, far from the great halls and throne rooms where the nobles gathered. He was technically a guest, but in practice he was something between a curiosity and a threat. The Valorians did not know what to do with him, So they watched him instead. He was studied by their scholars, questioned by their priests, examined by their doctors. They wanted to understand how a human worked, what made him different, what made him do the things he did. Danny answered their questions as best he could, though he often did not have the answers they were looking for. Some Valorians treated him with open contempt. They spat when he walked past, whispered insults behind his back, made gestures that promised violence. Danny ignored them. He had faced worse things than disapproval. Others were different. They approached him with cautious curiosity, asked him questions about human life, listened to his stories with wide eyes. These encounters gave Danny hope. If some Valorians could see past their prejudice, perhaps more could follow. Kalith visited him often, despite her brother's objections. They walked through the crystal gardens of the palace, sat together on balconies overlooking the glittering cities, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Danny told her about his childhood on New Haven, about his mother, about the long years of loneliness that had followed her death. Kalith told him about her own isolation, about growing up in a family where love was always conditional, always political. They were both lonely people who had found something unexpected in each other. 7 months after Danny's arrival, word came that the Kathrani raiders had attacked a Valorian colony. It was the same fleet that had attacked Kalith's shuttle, grown bolder now, believing the sovereignty weak. They had taken prisoners and destroyed settlements, leaving thousands dead. The Empire demanded vengeance. Commander Valith was placed in charge of the response. He gathered a great fleet and made plans for a massive assault on the Kathrani base. It would be overwhelming force, a hammer blow that would crush the raiders forever. Danny watched the preparations with growing unease. He had fought the Kathrani before. He knew how they operated, and he could see the flaws in Valith's plan. He tried to speak to the commander, to offer advice based on his experience. Valith refused to see him. "I do not take counsel from animals," Valith said through a closed door. The fleet launched. The battle was a disaster. The Kathrani did not fight like proper soldiers. They did not hold formation or follow rules. They scattered when attacked, regrouped when the Valorians pursued, struck from angles that should have been impossible. They were chaos and cruelty, and the rigid Valorian tactics could not adapt. The fleet returned with half its ships destroyed and nothing to show for it. The Kathrani were still out there, stronger than before, laughing at the Empire's failure. Valith was humiliated. The court whispered that he had failed, that his arrogance had cost them dearly. Some even whispered that the human could have done better. 2 days after the failed attack, Danny was summoned to the matriarch's private chambers. Thesara sat alone in a room filled with ancient books and strange artifacts. She looked tired, older than she had before, as if the weight of 3 centuries was finally catching up with her. "Tell me what my son did wrong," she said. Danny hesitated. "I don't want to cause more trouble." "You will cause trouble by staying silent." "Speak." So Danny spoke. He told her about the Kathrani, about their tactics and their psychology. They were bullies and cowards, he explained. They only attacked when they were sure of victory. They exploited patterns, relied on their enemies being predictable. "Your son gave them exactly what they expected," Danny said. "Overwhelming force moving in straight lines. They had probably planned for that response since before they attacked the colony." "And what would you have done differently?" "I would have been unpredictable. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to win is to do something your enemy thinks is crazy. Break the rules, take risks, make them afraid to guess what you'll do next." Thesara was silent for a long moment. "My people have followed the same military traditions for thousands of years," she said finally. "We have conquered enemies far more powerful than the Kathrani. We have never needed to change." Maybe it's time to learn something new. It was a bold thing to say to a 300-year-old empress, but Danny had stopped being careful a long time ago. Thesara studied him with those ancient eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded. Plan an attack. Use whatever resources you need. My advisors will assist you. Danny felt his heart skip. You want me to lead a battle? I want you to show me what a human can do. The second attack on the Kathrani base was nothing like the first. Danny's plan was unconventional, risky, and completely unexpected. He split the fleet into small groups that attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. He used decoys and false signals to create confusion. He led a strike team personally, flying a Valorian fighter that had been modified to his specifications. The Kathrani did not know what to do. Their carefully prepared defenses were useless against an enemy that refused to behave properly. Their command structure collapsed as they tried to respond to threats that appeared and disappeared without warning. The battle lasted 4 hours. By the end, the Kathrani fleet was destroyed. Their base was in ruins, and their prisoners were free. Valorian losses were minimal. Danny returned to Valoris Prime as something he had never expected to be, a hero. The court that had wanted him dead now whispered his name with something like respect. Nobles who had refused to look at him before now sought his attention. Even Valith, though he could not bring himself to offer congratulations, stopped making threats. But none of that mattered to Danny. What mattered was the look in Kaleth's eyes when he stepped off the ship, the way she ran to him and threw her arms around him without caring who was watching. You came back, she whispered. I promised I would. High Matriarch Thesara summoned Danny to the throne chamber one final time. The court was gathered again, but the atmosphere was different now. The hostility had faded, replaced by something cautious and curious. Thesara descended from her throne and stood before Danny, just as she had at his judgment so many months ago. My daughter told me something when she first returned, Thesara said, her voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. She said, Mother, he saved my life. I did not believe her. I thought she was deceived, manipulated. I thought humans incapable of selflessness. She paused. I was wrong. The court fell silent. The High Matriarch had never admitted to being wrong about anything. You have shown my people something they did not expect to see, Thesara continued. You have acted with honor, with courage, with compassion. You have asked for nothing in return. You have earned something that no outsider has ever earned in the history of our empire. She placed her hand on Danny's shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement, of respect, of welcome. You are no longer bound by the life debt. You are free to leave whenever you wish. A ship will take you back to human space if that is what you want. Danny looked at Kaleth, who stood nearby with hope and fear battling in her silver eyes. If it's all the same to you, he said quietly, I think I'd like to stay a while longer. Thesara almost smiled. I thought you might say that. That evening, Danny and Kaleth stood together on a balcony overlooking the crystal spires of the city. The 3 suns were setting, painting the sky in colors that had no names in human language. Below them, for the first time in the history of the Valorian sovereignty, a human flag flew beside the Valorian banner. My people still do not understand why you came for me that day, Kaleth said. Danny shrugged. Maybe that's okay. Maybe they don't need to understand. Maybe they just need to see. She took his hand. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. Nobody knows. That's what makes it exciting. Kaleth laughed, a sound like silver bells in the evening air. You are a very strange human, Danny Cole. And you're a very strange princess. They stood together in the fading light, 2 people from different worlds, different species, different everything. Behind them, the palace hummed with activity, with nobles and servants and guards who were slowly learning that the universe was bigger and stranger and more beautiful than they had ever imagined. And somewhere, across the vast emptiness of space, other humans were hearing the story. A story about a pilot who saved an alien princess, who stood before an empress and spoke the truth, who showed an ancient civilization that humanity was more than they had ever believed. It was a good story, and like all good stories, it was only the beginning.